Department of Public Works. Mr. Shield.
I mean, one of my reports is kind of short. June was kind of tough, because I was off a week, Dave was off a week, Jeff was off a week. Everybody had stuff going on, but we got a lot of stuff done. We had one kind of a little emergency with a tree in one of the storms on Ramaka Park. We actually had to close the road down. There was a big branch that was hung probably 50, 60 feet up, probably 2 foot around, still alive, old. And it was just way out of our capability, even with our bucket truck, to try and get that thing down. So, with being kind of emergent, I got a hold of Arbor Images, who's done a lot of work for us. They came in the very next day, and 5 hours they had it on the ground. A little pricey, but in an emergent situation, that's what we had to do. We're open compost site, everybody was very happy with that. I looked into an option, talking with Dave Buser and Alicia Zawicki from the Department of Natural Resources, Solid Waste, and she, I believe, is the engineer for closed old dumps. Versus chipping all of our brush. We could probably still chip some of it, but with all the acres we have out there, Dave gave me a map of what the old dump actually looked like. Where our composting site is right now, wasn't even part of the old dump at all. And on one end, it'd be the north side, we could stack brush for 30 years, and all it's gonna do is keep breaking down. And they have no problem with it at all. With us driving out there, or anything, they said, yeah. I'll let her, Joe read it this afternoon, and I had another contact with Alicia, the engineer, this afternoon, and she was just double checking, and she said, no. Kind of it, so it'll be somewhat of a cost saving from the $1,000 every time we had to go out there and chip it with all of us.
Is there any way to sell some of the wood that we have chipped? Cause I know that I have chipped wood around as mulch around my property. I'm wondering if, there wasn't some sort of market for selling some of that.
I think you can open yourself up to some liability, especially
Okay.
with all the different invasive
Types of
bugs and
trees
stuff
and
that get brought in.
infection.
Yeah.
I wondered about that component, but I just thought of that.
The other part for the board to recognize, that 40-acre site, the old dump site, its footprint was about 15 acres. So there's 25 acres out there that's just open land, so it's not as if we're squeezing anything in there.
No.
It's
I don't know, if everybody been out there compost site? The old dump's pretty much dead center, which was the actual landfill itself.
Wasn't there discussion about putting a dog park out there on part of it?
There was a request by, Clay
I
Montez
think-
about 10 years, 5 years.
Well,
ago.
no,
Yeah,
it
it's
was
been-
longer than that, it was like when I first got on
Oh.
board.
Yeah, it's been a
2012.
long time, and they tried out there just with the contour of, and he had a big Newfoundland or something like that.
Yeah.
Fortunately,
Yeah.
yeah, of course it was.
Yeah, he tried it for once and,
It wasn't.
But there may have been, maybe what you're thinking of, there may have been a request even before
before that.
Clay, the Clay was it, about 10 years ago.
Will part of the compost site still have to be mowed though?
Oh,
Cause I know you have to mow it.
yeah, and she reiterated that, it still has to be mowed once a year to keep any bigger woodier brush from growing down through that cap. Cause there's actually a 2-foot clay cap and there's 18 inches of topsoil on top of it. And as long as you stay off of that, it's ours to use as we need.
So you have to stay off the clay, is that?
Stay off the cap.
Okay,
Now,
how is that marked?
yeah, out of the 40 acres.
Roughly 15 of it is, yeah.
Pretty good.
Joe's got a,
Pretty good place, like.
like I said, with me being on vacation, I just got clarification on all this today.
Yeah, you're playing catch up.
It was in the middle.
And you need a little bit of breathing room to
Yeah.
catch up, I I agree.
Yeah.
If that's what it is. Blue is the old dump footprint. and
Yeah,
it's
well, it'll be,
40 acres
I
square.
mean, half an hour now to go out there, push the brush out, stack up the compost for the day, and if you're out there an hour before, for
So
one guy.
will you rework, cause I know that before you went on vacation, you put together a budget. Is that for the compost site with having to
Chip it.
man that?
Maybe then chip it.
So are we going to create a hybrid, budget, or are you going back to the original budget?
Probably, cause now with not having to, if we were gonna man it, to make, if we were gonna chip it, so we had to make sure the right size stuff was coming in, everything was laid, so that we could actually get at it pretty easy. This way now they can, we'll still have somebody open it and stay there for an hour before.
Okay.
So we'll cut some cost there also.
Okay,
It won't be as expensive as what you
so we'll
shipping it.
revise
Yeah.
that original,
Yeah.
or that
There'll also
secondary.
be some nice habitat
Have it
for
there.
critters.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
just a question, to clarify, so the leaf branches to naturally decay
Yep.
and never chip?
And unless we get a big request, but usually in the fall and winter, when we do all our trimming, we have wood chips at hand, if people want them.
This last storm, did we have a lot of brush that needed to be taken to that area?
Yes, it was quite busy last time, wasn't it?
I had guys working in
Yeah.
their absence, so.
Yes, they covered,
Thanks to.
they covered very well.
Thanks to the DPW crew for doing that, cause it seemed like we had a lot of straight lines.
Yeah, they kinda came out of nowhere,
It
from what everybody's told me.
I was outside picking raspberries and then all of a sudden it came up and I thought,
Yeah.
where is this going?
Okay, anything else?
John Stoss brought it to my attention, we might have another road damage
One by you.
parcel on Sternsburg Road. I contacted Vince today, cause I went in to see if any equipment was there, if I could get a name off of it. It's as bad, if not worse, than Carter School Road. Or, Bell School Road.
Is it back forward?
No, the new house, new,
Yeah, and 8684 Sternsburg Road. And I got pictures of that, so when Vince was supposed to contact me or send me an email with the contractor's name or builder's name, so I can try to figure out who did the basement work, cause the basement walls are up, backfilled and all that, so I'm guessing it was either an excavator or a builder. But like I said, it's as bad, if not
It was
worse.
an excavator, I
Yeah.
remember seeing it.
you know, you drive by that. big
Thanks,
work.
John.
They
pointing
they
that
were
out.
coming out when I went by with my daughter yet, they weren't on the road yet though. They
So
were
it's just
over.
gonna be some few phone calls to try and figure out who was, and hopefully not the same company. I hope.
They're reporting on the road.
Yeah,
Okay. Alright.
and then, had a meeting with Chuck Decker and some people from Potter's Lake. Cause, I don't know if everybody knows, around Potter's Lake, they have, basically city sewer was put in 1981, I do believe. And our main lift station is actually 27 feet in the ground. And we got to ride a little elevator down and do maintenance and stuff on there. The walls are starting to flake, the bottom's starting to flake, cause it's all metal, been in the ground for that long. And it's time for a rehab. And when we'd abandon that, they put new pumps in and bring a lot of stuff above ground. But that's to the tune of $650,000.
Wow.
We got a quote from the same company 2 years ago, it was $450. It jumped that bad. That's something that Potter's Lake is gonna have coming down the
So the wet well in that pump station, is it metal or is it concrete?
concrete is the wet well. But
All the stuff inside.
cause you got the wet wells next to it, and then you got, we're all mechanical, cause ours is in a metal sleeve basically. And you're right, a little rickety elevator down. It's time before, cause I'm sure it's below lake level bottom, and and if that springs a leak, it's not gonna be good. That's something coming down the pipe for next year for Potters Lake people.
Okay. Other questions?
650,000.
650. Good.
One problem solved and a big one will.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been talked about the last few years, and now they finally the engineers came out, went down with a couple of Potters Lake management people came over, Chuck Decker, who's head of the sanitary district over there, all went down, and we're like, okay, it's time.
Yeah.
I mean, there's chunks coming off the side of the softball that, none of it is just bad. Yes, it's gonna find space.
Is there, being on, there is a compromise in the structure, is that something we need to notify the fire district of?
Because we don't go down there anymore.
You don't?
No.
Okay,
This, cause a lot of the electric part we actually put in, we got a two and a half car garage over there, we brought a lot of electrics up there. The only time we have to really do something is if a pump that like that,
okay,
but it's confined space, we've all been confined space trained, so.
right,
We got the meters, it's got fresh air that blows in,
okay.
so.
Okay. Right, thank you very much. Please, report, Chief Murphy.
Provided you guys a copy of our numbers for the month, the year to date, and then the month of June. I also included, a copy of the monthly report from the boat patrol. And looking at that, for the month of June, submitted to the DNR, we had 5 citations and 3 warnings. Just out of my own morbid curiosity, I went back to 2021 because last year was not a normal year for the police department or the boat patrol, so I don't think it would be fair to compare. But comparing, for the entire year of 2021, only 13 citations were written on Lake Beulah the entire summer. So far this year, we already have 11, and it's just past the 4th of July. So we are certainly ahead of the ball game with strict enforcement of the lake as compared to in years past. So, wanted to point that out.
Thanks for noting that.
For the month of June, little slower than I anticipated. A total of 695 calls for service, which is almost the 3rd slowest month of the year, compared to February and then followed by January. So calls for service were significantly down compared to May at 800 calls for service. So that's a significant change that just wanted to point out to you. And then the last item I had emailed the information at the last town board meeting. I spoke about a code enforcement officer, or looking at a code enforcement company. The company that I spoke with is Markley Municipal Services. As I explained in the board meeting in June, they work with a lot of the local municipalities. After Shannon Markley, who is the one I was in contact with, sent me the information that I forwarded to you guys as far as what that stuff looks like as far as agreements between the municipalities. I believe she sent 2 of them to us. I spoke with her, and Shannon has asked her husband Dave Markley, who works with Markley Municipal Services, to be here as I did, if you have any questions specific to what they do. And question was posed to me, what do we need this for? And the analogy that I used was, if I'm a builder and I wanna get a little bit ahead of the game, I find somebody like Vince, our building inspector, and I put him on my staff as retainer, and I have them look at things when I'm starting to do it and bounce off and maybe anticipate some of the things for the future. If I'm gonna be putting up a project with Vince's expertise, if I was a builder and hired him, I can show him the project, show him the layout, and he's gonna be able to point out maybe some deficiencies I have, or places I need to shore things up, or making some changes. And that is kind of what I'm looking at with code enforcement. To my knowledge, none of the 6 of us that are currently full-time at the police department have any code enforcement background. If you tell me or ask me the difference between a C2 property and a C4 property, I don't have a clue. If I need to find a property line, I use the Walworth County zoning map, and as we found out in the past, those maps aren't that accurate. There were errors on them. The information is put in by humans. We make mistakes, so if I refer to that, and that information is bad, then I give that information. Because that's not my forte, that's not what I do. It is what a company like Marketing Municipal Services does, and they do it for a lot of our local municipalities in the county.
Couple comments on that. Number one, it's not budget for us, so this would be something we're gonna have to talk about for 2024. But explain for me, and you had mentioned code enforcement versus ordinance enforcement, because you have to enforce ordinances. So how
Right.
do you differentiate that with the municipal code?
When-
Building code, zoning code?
some of the things that I've been asked to look into, to give you an example. And I don't mean to pick on anybody on the board or Mr. Mills. If I offend, I'm not trying to. If I read some of our, property abatement, junk vehicle, junk on our property, the ordinances are really vague, and it's a mindset. So me as a law enforcement officer, what I don't wanna have is a law that I can read 2 ways. And I think Mr. Mills, probably being in the attorney side of things, understands what I'm talking about. I can read it one way, and I can apply it, or I can look at it a slightly different way and apply it a different way. And a lot of times that comes up, with code enforcement type of things, building code type of things, and it's very prevalent in union contracts. As an example, a union contract can say something and be interpreted a completely different way because you meant it one way when you were writing it. We interpreted it a different way as we're reading it as the employee. However, we both agreed to it, but 2 years down the road, we're bickering, arguing because we see it from opposite ways, and it actually says it and could be applied both ways. And that's the type of stuff that really like to work out in our ordinances and code enforcement type area, because we don't get that expertise. We don't see it all the time. I don't run into a ton of code enforcement stuff. I haven't since September. I think I've had 1 complaint. So it's not a high priority, and absolutely agree with the chairman. I'm not looking for this to happen during this budget cycle. I'm looking to the future and the next budget cycle for that. So I'm glad the chairman actually brought that up, because trying to do it now, we're already in a budget cycle, and I don't see where the funds would come from for that. But it's something to be brought up now. We have time to chew on it before we reach our September, October timeframe when we start sitting down and talking about budgets. And you get all the questions asked, get it all aired out, and have a good vetting, and make a very informed decision if that's something we want to do.
And we know it's gonna be about $50 an hour. But once in the contract we were looking at the city of Delavan, it had landlord licensing, building registration, program inspection, and code enforcement. Now, I don't think we necessarily have a need for the landlord licensing or even vacant building registration, because we, ordinance we have, but we have peer permits. That could be in there instead of those. Peer permits and code enforcement maybe is what we'd be looking at.
No, we're under county zoning, and I'm not sure if Delavan has its own zoning code,
Yeah, no,
that would make a huge difference.
I can't answer that, Mr. Mills, I don't even know if Mr. Hartley could answer that.
Delaware, the city of Delaware has their own zoning code.
Okay,
Okay.
so we wouldn't have that here.
correct, that's what I'm saying, instead of, those first three items listed like the Delavan, it would be code enforcement and maybe
We don't
peer.
have them.
Yeah,
No,
I
no.
think Jim is saying
Well,
zoning in general.
It was only in general, it doesn't come
County.
from.
Right.
So, the county has to deal with that.
Can I ask if you, consulted or advised, previous police chiefs when there have been questions?
I have, but I can count on probably one hand in the last 5 years when we've even had a complaint like this. And I know prior to that, what generally would happen is the former chiefs would issue a citation. And then I know with Chief Surges, give months and months worth of time to try to allow them to bring the property into compliance. So very seldom even got before the municipal judge here.
So maybe the proper term, instead of saying code enforcement, would be ordinance enforcement. Because we have our ordinances, which are our towns and our court.
Yeah, and I don't know, when I'm looking on the webpage, it talks about ordinances, it talks about codes, so.
Okay, that's the
Right.
ordinance.
And Vince would
Tomato,
deal with
tomato, I
building
guess, at this
code.
point.
Right. Things would be the-
Weeds are covered by you and Todd.
So,
So I don't know if there's much left over that would make it worthwhile, but I would like, a list of the ordinances, that you want to be more specific in nature.
yes,
And then we can maybe, I can get authorization maybe later in the year to revisit those.
okay.
That's what I was gonna ask about too, is if there's something in particular that you guys are running into, certain ones that we really try to define it more for you, so that you're like,
I can tell you one now, the loud music ordinance. Feel free to pull it up and read it.
yep,
There's zero time frame in it, and based on my reading of it, Michelle decides to run her chainsaw at 2 PM. Todd doesn't like it. Todd can call and say, Michelle's running her chainsaw and it's annoying me. And based on our ordinance, I should go over and write Michelle a ticket for cutting her trees down at 2 PM.
I think there's a reference to decibel level, which I know would never happen.
Right?
So I don't know how anyone ever gets cited under that ordinance.
It's super vague, and that's the one that comes to mind, is the loud noise that, in 2 PM, you're running your chainsaw and your neighbor calls, I should be writing you a ticket. That doesn't feel right to me, so.
How does this help the everyday citizen?
I don't wanna open Pandora's box, Supervisor Tripp, but what it would do is, I think, give an extra set of eyes, and right now, we are complaint-based for, different types of ordinance violations. And a lot of the municipalities start out as that, using Sharon and Darien as an example. And once they, employed, the code enforcement and saw how they worked in their professionalism, it is now, they go out and will take notice of something that's starting, and so kinda nip it in the bud before it gets going.
That helps.
To have the abatement process start early. Chad decides he's gonna park 3 snowmobiles in his front yard, and it appears that they're starting to rust out. The code enforcement may knock on Chad's front door and say, snowmobiles in the front yard, under this ordinance, you can't be doing that, you're gonna have to come up with a plan. And so earlier intervention and prevention is, where I would see it actually go, type of thing, so that it doesn't get, out of control.
Thank you.
Just
Just a heads up, a forethought, with the new, proposed development on the former Double D site. The gentleman presented to the planning commission plans for a band shell and music. So those people on Mill Pond or in the streets around there, aren't aware of that, because that proposal came in after our notes were given to us. So that you have the possibility of a noise issue that could be tested. I have a question, are you the aforementioned Mr. Markman?
Yes, I am.
May I ask you a question? So you're independent contractors, so how does it work with you as a code enforcer in incorporated communities? Specifically working directly with the building inspector or the police departments?
Yeah, so all the above, so, thanks for having me, so like Chief correctly said, my wife is the chief of this operation, but she had some landlord licensing inspections, so the way so we do work well with the police department, as you indicated. My wife, if there was something to do with a building inspection or something that would be inspected, if you wanted that service, she could work with a building inspector, as she does with the city of Delavan, because they have their own building inspector, and every other municipal town that we have has their own building inspector, so we don't offer building inspections as far as like new construction and stuff like that, but my wife does do inspections regarding landlord licensing, or you mentioned the vacant building, what are they? Vacant building registration, which all that essentially says is that a building that's vacant for so long, they have to register with the community, and it usually results in a fee on that person, and then that requires them to have an inspection yearly. Otherwise what we've noticed, like Darien just created this, otherwise you're gonna have a building like what we had in Darien, where it just gets so blighted that we have to tear it down. And we obviously don't want that to happen. So it started with the city of Delavan, and then that's how that works. But the way we work with the police department, if we have an ordinance violation of something, let's say of unsightly debris or a building that patrol goes out on, and then they, like a rescue call or something like that, and they get inside of a house that is so hoarded that it's unsafe for someone to live in, then we have the authority to condemn that. We usually work with the city or the town attorney, in how to condemn that property to make it habitable for someone to live in. And then, if Attorney Mills mentioned the previous chief or whoever it was that would write citations for code enforcement violations or ordinance violations and give them so much time. We actually don't write a lot of citations at all. We usually mail a letter first, or 2 letters, or sometimes 3 letters, and try to get them to comply with it. And as long as they're like complying a little bit, then we don't get to a point where we have to issue a citation. And then if it gets to a point where then we do work with the police department in all the communities that we have. We actually have our own tracks login that as civilians we write municipal code tickets, but that's essentially up to the police department. I mean, it started one way where the patrol officers would do it, as Lieutenant Runge used to work for the town of Delavan. We did the town of Delavan too, and that's how I think it started. And then essentially we started writing the citations on our own because Runge doesn't want to write the citations. So we do.
How long have you been doing this?
Well, my wife has been doing it since 2002, and she was a certified building inspector at that time with the city of Delavan, and the assistant to the building inspector. And then we became contractual municipal code enforcement in 2014. So we currently have, besides me and my wife, I'm actually a police lieutenant in the city of Delavan, so that's not my full-time gig. But between me and my wife, we have 2 other employees that we have that will do some of our work for us in Delavan and Darien. And we also work with my son, who is 26 years old, and his fiance, and who have also their own code enforcement company. So collectively, we have 12 communities that we do code enforcement for.
Do any of your clients encompass lake properties? So issues that we've been talking about, piers, marinas,
I wouldn't say peers, I don't recall having a dealings with peers, but when we do town of Delavan, just like I noticed with the town of East Troy here, you have a residential area just as the town of Delavan does around the lake that we want. That obviously is a great place for people to come, people to visit, so we wanna make sure that the properties there are in good condition, so that someone who has a really nice house, that does a lot of work into their house, they want the property's value goes up, and we wanna make sure the person next door who's parking not just 8 boats, but 8 abandoned boats that have weeds growing through them, we can get those off the property too. So, as far as town of Delavan goes, and I know my son, he has like Lynn Township and, Town of Geneva, areas like that, we also have done, I don't know if you do short-term rentals here, but we've done short-term rental inspections, like they have to register with, I don't know if they register with the town and with the county, or, but then that requires an inspection on the short-term rentals too. But as far as lake communities, yeah, we definitely have experience with lakes.
So you're saying that this would be like, the police would forward you a report, or, you know, just like an address or a concern, and then your team would go out and look at it, or your team is already?
It's actually how the town would like us to do it. If the town wants a complaint based, like the chief said, it's either gonna come to him first, or it's probably gonna come to the window. And then the window, or the town clerk or whoever's in charge in the window, they usually will just forward us an email. I mean, if you'd rather go through the chief first, that's fine too. It's rarely, all the towns do it, and if you want it to be more proactive, where we're driving around looking for stuff, we do that too. That seems, cause a lot of these towns start complaint based, but then I think they find it easier for us to drive around and find stuff too, because the neighbor doesn't always wanna complain to the neighbor. Or when the neighbor complains to the trustees of this property, I don't know any of you guys wanna go up there and knock on the door and be like, you gotta mow your grass, or whatever the complaint is, you know, so we'll do that.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Right.
Thanks for the invite.
Next time we'll be kicking this around some. Thank you very much. You all done?
I am all done, unless somebody has something for me.
All right, no other questions? Anybody for the chief?
Officer Crowell,
Yes.
commendation from the fire district.
Yes, on our Facebook page, Officer Kroll responded, assisting the sheriff's office out at Alpine Valley Resort, found a man in cardiac distress, pulse is not breather, immediately started CPR, fixed his AED, and in Chief DeGaro's assessment, arriving second on scene, had Officer Crowell not acted in the manner that he did, with timely, unwavering action, the man may not have survived the choking / cardiac arrest event.
Please compliment him from us.
I embarrassed him in front of the entire police department when I gave him his commendation, I think. He turned pretty red, and he's got, yeah, I made sure it was done very publicly, so.
I'm honored that he took the initiative to do that.
Yes.
Okay, anything else? We good?
Thanks.
All right, thank you.